Hello and welcome once again to Mansfield Ceramics Gallery here in our new space in level 1, 99 Crown Street in Darlinghurst. And last Friday we had a massive opening for the first solo exhibition by West Australian artist Crowe. First solo exhibition on the east coast of Australia. So Greg has been making pots for over 4 decades now. He's one of Australia's most recognised and highly regarded potters, as well as a very gifted teacher. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Bernadette.
And what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to talk about or introduce you, our audience, to Greg's background in WA, where you actually established a school of ceramics at your pottery.
Yes, I did it in a fairly low-key way, but when I left TAFE, about 2010, then I started running classes from my own workshop. But it was a school, but in a very relaxed manner. Yes.
Okay. And now you've been over on the living over on the east side for how long on the east coast?
15 or 16 months.
And how does it differ, can I ask you, from Western Australia?
How does it differ? Geographically, I mean, you realise that Perth is very much like a desert city almost, or bordering on the edge of a desert, between the desert and the ocean. So coming to Sydney, the natural geography of Sydney is just spectacular. The vegetation, the lushness, I think, is what really hits you.
Yes.
The density of the population in Sydney hits you.
Yes.
They're the main things. Speaking from my still having an interest in architecture, although I really gave that up a long time ago, I find the challenges that are facing Sydney interesting, to say the least.
Yes. And regarding the ceramics community in WA, it's a thriving community, a small community, a large community?
I'd say you'd have to say it's a fairly small community. I think I don't know what the membership of the local organisation, the Ceramic Arts Association in WA, but it fluctuates probably somewhere between 100 and 150. I'm not sure. So that would be across the whole state. So it is a fairly small population compared to New South Wales.
To New South Wales. That's what I mean. I'm just trying to paint a picture really for our listeners.
Yes.
So in WA, you'd have a Potter Society there.
Yes.
And you meet regularly. But I'm gauging from what you've said about the physicality of WA that you're fairly distanced apart, are you? Or?
Well, Perth really does hold, I don't know what the exact figure is, but probably 95% of Western Australia's population lives in Perth.
Right.
So that's a game where it probably varies from the East Coast, where you have many more smaller regional or medium-sized regional centres, as well as the 3 big capital cities on the coast. So in WA, Perth is much more the dominant population centre. So most of the members would have been in Perth or in the southwest.
Yes. And dry heat? What's it like?
Dry and hot.
Dry and hot. 12 months of the year?
No. In fact, Perth can have and has had, I believe, this winter, quite a wet winter. So June, July, August, mainly July, August, can actually be very, very wet, heavy rain. That's when we get most of our rainfall.
Right.
But then it can be equally through the summer, dry and hot for a long period of time.
And so, so you made the decision to come to the East Coast. Why?
I'd say it would have to be predominantly the children living over here. And also the feeling that although we'd travelled a bit, we'd never lived for any extended period of time anywhere other than Perth, other than a few months. So both Heath and I just felt we needed to have a change as well. So it was a mixture of those two things, yes.
And this fantastic work that we see behind us here, which is stunning. The moment anybody walks into the gallery, it's got the wow factor. Can I ask you about the concept that underpins this body of work? Not the whole body of work, but just this particular installation on this wall.
Sure. Western Australia, and particularly where I am in the hills, we call them the hills, sort of east of Perth, just east of Perth, is very, very well endowed with clay and a lot of the materials that you need for ceramics. So about 50 kilometres east of where I was, there was a place called Clackline that had produced refractory fire bricks of all sorts, a huge diversity of fire bricks and fire clay and materials for ceramic industry for probably about 100 years. And then it closed down about 15 years ago. And I've always loved old industrial buildings.
Yes.
So, in fact,
this is your architectural background,
yeah,
perhaps?
yeah. I've
maybe?
always, I mean, I was sort of interested in warehouse living 40 years ago when I was an architecture student.
Okay.
So I've always loved that, and I love old factories. That sort of environment. So I used to go to Clackline fairly regularly for materials, and then they closed down about 15 years ago, and I just happened to, it was one of those fortuitous days, I happened to be there, and I looked into a shed, and there was these wooden moulds that were...
which are these?
Which are these?
Yeah.
Which were used to make a whole variety of ceramic products for all sorts of different companies in Western Australia that had anything where they were producing things using heat.
Right.
So if they had any sort of furnaces or anything,
Yes.
because Western Australia is so isolated, it was a local industry, and the fire clay was good, and so I saw these moulds, and I actually had a small truck at the time, and so I bought them. I bought the whole shed load of trucks of moulds, and they went into the veranda of the pottery. And you should realise that my pottery is just this huge accumulation of anything to do with ceramics, old kilns, fire, refractory products, fire bricks, all sorts of things. And they sat there where I would walk past them every day to go into the pottery, and I was mulling over how to use them. And I think sometimes ideas take a long time to gel, and then an opportunity arose where there was a very large ceramics exhibition at the Lawrence Wilson Gallery in 2014 at the University of WA, and they wanted work that was going to be displayed in a non-traditional manner of displaying pottery.
Okay.
And the scale of the gallery was enormous. So it gave me an opportunity to use these moulds and to think of a form that I felt could work with them. And I hadn't done bottles really up till this period. I sort of just hadn't been something I'd done. And then I thought bottles would be the way to go that would fit in. And it's a reflection on the sort of, I've always liked things that have an aged quality, a weathered quality.
Yes.
And I also, when I was doing the bottles, my throwing is usually fairly immediate. And with these, there's actually quite a lot of, I'm not a hand builder, but there's actually quite a lot of hand treatment of the surface. Yes. And almost getting a non-thrown surface
sort of
on
feel
them.
to them.
Yeah, to feel to them. And it's about containment and the sort of aged quality, the weathered quality of the wood and the moulds. And I also like the fact that some of the moulds are actually quite a high level of skill, particularly where you see some of the curved moulds, and then others really just look like they needed a mould quickly, and they've just been slapped together fairly quickly.
And how old would they be?
Well, Clackline was going 100 years. Okay. Just over 100 years. So they could be, I don't know how old, some of them.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just think so many people have remarked over as they've come through the exhibition as well. Not only is there the beautiful framing of your pots in here, which also carry an aged quality to them, but then there is a church-like feel because of the arch perhaps in the centre, and because if we look back to Baroque art where recesses were used for sculpture, etc. So it just comes together just so beautifully. And if your other work in the gallery, there is certainly, I would suggest that you're drawn to a utility in your work.
Yes. Look, maybe not so much with the work in this exhibition,
Yes.
but I do a lot of
Yes.
utilitarian tableware as well,
Yeah.
both.
And wood firing. That's
And wood firing, and salt glazing as well.
Yes.
I think, well, it was wood fired. My kiln in Perth was wood fired salt glaze, and I think that is possibly my real love. There's the salt glazing,
Yes.
but both the wood firing and the salt
Yeah.
glazing. Sometimes I find it. I almost confuse myself as to which it's come out of.
Yes.
I haven't had they cross boundaries between the straight
Yes.
wood firing and the salt glazing.
Yes.
Yes.
Look, I have to say, from our point of view, it is lovely living with your work every day when we come into the gallery. We encourage, as we always do. We're highly selective with who we show it. We're in I suppose, a privileged position in that we can select who to show here. We're delighted that Greg Crowe has his first solo exhibition on the east side of Australia with us here at Mansfield Ceramics Gallery. The show is on until the end of the month. Please come along. There's also images up online on our website, www.mansfieldceramics.com. Greg Crowe, thank you very much indeed
Thank you.
for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.